Welcome to the Invite Health podcast, where our degreed healthcare professionals are excited to offer you the most important health and wellness information you need to make informed choices about your health. You can learn more about the products discussed in each of these episodes and all that Invite Health has to offer at www.invitehealth.com/podcast. First-time customers can use promo code podcast at checkout for an additional 15% off your first purchase. Let's get started.
Isn't it funny sometimes that going through life, you can look back at certain things and think, why was I not a fan of mushrooms? Why didn't I like to eat mushrooms as a kid? And now that I know more about mushrooms and all of their many benefits, especially when we look at the immune system, when we look at detoxification, it is really astonishing just to think that these little fungus do so much for our bodies. And it's not just for our bodies. I want to tell you about mycoremediation as well. This is something that really sparked a lot of interest for me many years ago. I was watching a television program and they were talking about how they were utilizing fungus, so these mushrooms, to basically go through and filter out and clean up areas where there had been oil spills and other toxic chemicals that had seeped into fresh water supplies. So I thought, well, this is really kind of fascinating. So I've done a lot of independent research now looking into mycoremediation. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And then I want to talk about the science behind how mushroom extracts can be very beneficial when it comes to our immune system and when it comes to our overall health and wellness. So I am Amanda Williams, MD, MPH. So let's talk a little bit about mycoremediation, because I think that this is really quite fascinating. There's been, I would say, an underwhelming amount of information out there on mycoremediation. So unless someone's watching, Discovery Channel or National Geographic or something like that, you probably have never heard about this, but they're actually doing mycoremediation throughout the country. So you ask yourself, well, what in the world is this actual mycoremediation? Why is so much focus been on the utilization of mushrooms when it comes to this? And they found that mushrooms are a wonderful mycoremediation tool. And you think about different environmental things. You can look back at the Exxon Valdez, and we can look at the BP spill out in the Gulf, and we recognize the extreme long-term damage that this creates in those ecosystems. And what they've been able to determine is through the utilization of mushrooms that this can really work in a fabulous way to target that type of toxic spillage or any of these biochemical problems that can pollute certain areas. So using remediation through fungus, hence myco for the fungus part, mycoremediation is referring to mushrooms and the enzymes contained within the mushrooms having this ability to degrade a wide variety of environmentally persistent pollutants and things that we know are creating havoc in our environment. So mushrooms, they use different methods to actually decontaminate polluted areas, and to also at the same time, which is really cool, they help to stimulate the environment. So there's biodegradation, there's bioabsorption, and then there's bioconversion. And so there's these different phases in which the mushrooms themselves are really quite impactful to helping not only the areas that are completely inundated by these toxic spills, but also to help the underlying ecosystem in terms of bouncing back. So I think it's really quite fascinating. I'm not going to get too much into detail on this, but it makes me kind of go back to when I was a little kid, and if someone tried to sneak some mushrooms into a salad or put mushroom on, say, a piece of pizza, or mushrooms anywhere was not going to be my friend. I was not a fan, and I think that's probably fairly common for most little kids. Most little kids aren't big into their fruits and vegetables, as they should be. Now we certainly know much more about that, but especially when it comes to the quote-unquote odd things like a mushroom. Now I absolutely love mushrooms, and now that I'm more science savvy, I certainly understand the medicinal reasons as to why one would want to incorporate not only whole food mushrooms into your daily routine, but also looking at mushroom extract as being part of a supplementation routine for a variety of different reasons. We know that mushrooms have been an integral part of traditional Chinese medicine for hundreds of years, and they target a variety of different diseases. But we also know that when it comes to scientific research, that Western medicine has certainly been able to replicate the mushroom's benefit in terms of human clinical research trials as well as laboratory trials. The unfortunate thing is that most doctors in the United States still are either not aware of these wonderful bits of research or are just uninterested. So that's why I want to tell you a little bit about mushrooms today. And there was a really great study that came out about 5 years ago out of the University of Florida through their Institute of Food and Agricultural Sciences. And they published this in the American College of Nutrition. And it was really kind of a interesting setup. The way the University of Florida did this is they gave people shiitake mushrooms. And so they gave them cooked shiitake mushrooms. They weren't having them eat them raw. They cooked these mushrooms down, and they had them eat mushrooms every day for 4 weeks, so a month. So every single day you were incorporating shiitake mushrooms into your diet. And this was run through the University of Florida Food and Science and Human Nutrition Division. And I thought it was really kind of interesting because what they did is they took people who were quote unquote healthy, people between the ages of 20 and 40, and they put them on this dietary routine. So they gave them the mushrooms, they took it home, and they ate 4 ounces of the cooked mushrooms every single day. So the way that they were able to determine what type of an impact these shiitake mushrooms had was to do blood testing. So before they started the experiment, they were looking at their T cells, they were looking at different inflammatory markers in the body. And they said, if you eat shiitake mushrooms every single day, we should be able to see a change in their immune system. And interestingly enough, at the end of that 4-week trial, they did see exactly that. They found that the immune system was enhanced. They found a reduction in inflammation. And remember, these are people between the ages of 20 and 40 who are quote unquote healthy. So one wouldn't think they would have extensive amount of inflammation, but yet they saw these markers for inflammation coming down. So really absolutely astonishing how these mushrooms and the active chemical constituents that are derived within the mushrooms are actually working. So we know that mushrooms contain a good amount of fiber, getting vitamins and minerals, but they're also packed with powerful antioxidants. And it's those antioxidants that are derived from the mushrooms that a lot of the scientific research has been focusing in on. So mushrooms have a high amount of ergothioneine along with glutathione. Now you've probably heard of glutathione for sure. Glutathione is the body's primary endogenous antioxidant, meaning it's one of our most important antioxidant that the body actually makes. So we think about liver health and metabolic detoxification, glutathione. So we know mushrooms contain a high amount of glutathione. So what researchers at Penn State University did is they were looking to see if mushrooms that are packed with all these antioxidants actually had any type of anti-aging potential to them. So think about this. You go all the way back in time and you go, okay, mushrooms have been around for forever. We know that they're using mushrooms to help ecosystems, to clean up oil spills, to clean up toxic messes all over the place. And we also know that it's really beneficial for our immune system. It's easing up inflammation, it's giving us these wonderful antioxidants. So let's just see how powerful those antioxidants are. So that's what Penn State University did. They were looking at the different types of mushrooms and testing out the amount of ergothioneine and the amount of glutathione in those. So they looked at 13 different mushrooms. And the white button mushroom, which is fairly common that people will use, that had the least amount of antioxidants. But our other mushrooms, when we look at shiitake mushrooms, for example, we recognize, oh, hey, that actually has quite a bit of this ergothioneine along with that glutathione. And you can look at things like turkey tail, cordyceps mushrooms, royal sun, reishi. Sometimes people haven't heard of some of these. Lion's mane, for example, that's another very powerful antioxidant form of mushrooms. They were able to detect from this research at Penn State University that in certain areas of the world where people seem to have higher amounts of dietary intake of ergothioneine and glutathione, they had lower incidence of neurodegenerative diseases. So, ding ding, oxidative stress. So places such as France and Italy, where they had higher intake of mushrooms into their daily routine, they found that they had less likelihood of things like Alzheimer's disease, Parkinson's disease. But then you look here in the United States and you say, okay, if people are doing mushrooms, they're probably some type of canned, processed, in some type of who knows what sauce, not probably going to maintain the amount of antioxidants and other wonderful nutrients. So really fascinating that they've been able to hone that in on oxidative stress, and that the more of the ergothioneine and the glutathione derived from those mushrooms, the more protected the cells actually are. But here's a little bit more really fabulous information. So mushrooms, we know, are a fungus. So one would think, okay, what likes to feed on things like that? Well, bacteria do. So looking at mushrooms as a prebiotic, so being able to facilitate that feeding ability of the good, healthy bacteria. And in doing that, this may help to improve glucose regulation. So once again, researchers at Penn State University were looking at this. And they said, well, let's just take it really simple. Let's just look at the most commonly consumed mushroom. Let's look at the white button mushroom. And let's just see if this can do anything in terms of even a slight shift in the microbial community within the gut. And in doing so, would this improve the regulation of glucose? So the team of researchers there did just that. And they were recognizing that the mushrooms helped to change that composition of those gut microbiome. And those microbes were able to produce these short-chain fatty acids. This was all brought on by the incorporation of just introducing mushrooms. So much research out there on mushrooms. As a matter of fact, they even have, I stumbled across this many years ago when I was getting into the whole research on mycoremediation and being like, oh my gosh, like mushrooms can clean up the ocean? This is amazing stuff. But there's like a whole group that meets on a regular basis. It's the Mushroom Council. And they talk about all of the recent findings in terms of how it can be beneficial for human health and talking about all of the components to it. We know that mushrooms not only give us that ergothioneine and that glutathione, but they also have wonderful amounts of B12 in it. They have great amount of vitamin D2. So that's going to be your plant-based form of vitamin D. And these great enzymes that aid in proper detoxification. When we think about what the body needs to go through metabolic detoxification, oftentimes we overlook these things. Certainly when it comes to cancer research, there's been extensive research done in the National Cancer Journal. They go through and they talk about all of the different types of mushrooms and how those mushroom extracts. So this is going to go beyond just using them in your diet. This is actually using a high amount in an extracted capsule form. and how this can really be beneficial in that setting of cellular division. So there's many different mechanisms of action in which mushrooms are working within the human body. But if we can help to support the immune response, and we're utilizing mushrooms as a source of a prebiotic for those healthy bacteria, and it's easing up inflammation, and it's targeting TNF-alpha, tumor necrosis factor alpha. And we see these things. We see the shift in cytokine secretion. So kind of go back to that study at University of Florida where they took healthy volunteers and they're looking at TNF-alpha levels. They're looking at interleukin levels. And they were able to detect this and say, wow, just incorporating shiitake mushrooms every single day for a month did this much in terms of a positive modulation to the immune system. So a lot of vast research out there. I want people to understand that when it comes to supplementation and you're thinking about what can I do to support my immune system, or what's something that's good that would be beneficial for my gut and my brain. Remember, there's a strong connection to that. You can look at something like Mushrooms HX. You can go to our website, invitehealth.com, and look at Mushrooms HX, which is a blend of 8 different mushrooms. And the reason why that's important is because we know the vast amount of research across the spectrum when you're looking at mushrooms. So this has that shiitake, it has reishi mushroom in it, it has chaga, cordyceps mushrooms. All of these are combined, and you can have that as a simple capsule of these very powerful antioxidants, these polyphenols, these flavonoids, natural vitamin D, vitamins and minerals that are contained from natural mushrooms that will support the immune system and support overall metabolism in the body. So definitely check that out. And that is all that I have for you for today. I want to thank you for tuning in to the Invite Health podcast. Remember, you can find all of our episodes for free wherever you listen to podcasts or by visiting invitehealth.com/podcast. Make sure you subscribe and you leave us a review. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Invite Health. And we will see you next time for another episode of the Invite Health podcast.